almost 140 people. And I'd like to introduce Jill Bonino tonight for a program on tall-bearded iris today and tomorrow. And this is also a judges training session. A lot of you, I'm sure, know Jill. She has been a member of AIS since 1996. She's a master judge. She is currently the AIS treasurer and the AIS Foundation secretary treasurer. Jill grows all classes of irises except Japanese and Pacific Coast in the Los Angeles area. And she's been giving iris programs for well over 20 years. Jill has organized national conventions. She's judged the international iris competitions. And she just recently was one of the co-hosts of the first international iris competition held in the United States, which just concluded last week. So Jill has an enormous iris background, and welcome, Jill, and we're ready for your program. And you're muted, Jill.
Okay, thank you, Gary. That was, you forget. And I've had fun over the last 20 years doing what I've been doing. Welcome to everyone who is here. We're going to have JT. It's just on tall bearded. Some things apply to other irises, but for tonight, we're just looking at the tall beardeds. Andy, can I go ahead and share and bring up the program?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay, I'm sharing. Okay. And now I'll set up the slide program here now. Can everyone see that?
It looks good, Jill.
Looks good, like okay.
It works.
Now I'm, okay, now. I put up our logo from our 100th anniversary. I think it's very, very attractive and pretty, and I think we should acknowledge our achievements over the 100 years of the AIS being working with irises. Okay. First of all, this is what irises are supposed to look like. These are mature, tall-bearded clumps. They've been in the ground for a number of years. They are blooming floriferously. The flowers overall are not crowding or clumping each other, and their color is bright and cheery. But first, we have to look at the entire plant. We judge the entire plant for for any judging, for tall bearded judging. It's not just the flower. First of all, we're looking at the plant here to make sure it's got plenty of increases. We want the stalk to be tall and straight and allow for at least 7 buds to show off their grandeur over a 2-week period. And then we have the flower, which should be distinctive, and the color should create harmony, and we want it to be pleasing in the garden as you're walking. Here is our 2 graphics, one of just the bearded plant and its parts, which I'll go through here quickly. Some of this will be repeated, but then some of it's also on the test. The top petals on the flower are the standards. The bottom petals are the falls. The bud is an unopened flower. This is also known as a spur because it's a little appendage to the stalk that just holds one bud. Then we have the branch. Now this could hold more than 1 bud. The stalk is the stem. The leaves should be below the flowers, should be tall and erect. This is the rhizome. It's not a bulb. It is should be open to the surface with the roots planted down below. The AIS has a point system of 100 points for judging the tall bearded plant, divided up into the 3 areas: plant, stalk, and flower. And you don't necessarily have to memorize these, but occasionally you might need them just to make sure in judging a plant in the garden that it meets the proper scoring. The iris plant itself, garden judging of tall bearded is based totally on performance in the garden. This program is not at all about exhibition judging. That's a totally different animal. We're strictly looking at the iris as you're walking in your garden or someone else's garden. The ultimate objective is to seek and cast votes for those varieties of exceptional quality that perform consistently, very important word, over consecutive seasons, at least 2 seasons in the garden. You should be looking at the same plant before making up your mind. And lastly, the judge should make every effort to eliminate any ideas or opinions that reflect their personal preferences. For example, color. There's a wide range of subjectivity about color, but try to look at the plant objectively, from plant through flower, and then make your decision. The first part of the plant that we look at is the foliage, and it should be clean and crisp. These 2 pictures show upright, erect leaves that are the correct width for a tall bearded iris. They're not floppy. They are not spotted with leaf spot. They look healthy. Here's an example of the iris leaves that are a little on the skimpy side. When you look at individual leaves, they're a little thin and they're starting to flop. So these are not as healthy as the ones in the previous picture. Here is what you get when you have snail damage. And I know from personal experience, the snails they love iris leaves and flowers. So if you can get out early in the season and throw out the snail powder, that will help a lot, and keeping down the weeds. Here's a picture of foliage with leaf spot. Back here particularly, we've got the spotting. This comes from mostly overwatering from sprinklers, or if you live in a particularly humid climate where you get morning dew, morning mist, fog, you can experience leaf spot. Not all plants get it. You can usually tell a good plant in the garden from a not so good plant, because some plants are just not susceptible to leaf spot. And it's not something you can really spray against or prevent, other than try to trim off the leaves that are showing the damage. This is an unusual situation many times on the West Coast, when you have pineappling in your plant. And this is kind of it makes all the stalks look squished, because the rhizome is trying to put out more than one bloom stalk out of a rhizome. Normally, we've got 1, 2, 3 stalks all trying to come out of the same mother rhizome down here. And we don't know what causes it. It is not infectious. It doesn't spread to the other plants. Once this kind of cluster of stalks, and some of them will bloom, once that fades, the plant will increase, and it will increase normally. so that it's not something that carries over from year to year. You don't have to dig up the rhizome and throw it away. It's just an unusual situation that's right now is a mystery. And if any hybridizer out there or grower has figured out what causes this, we would all like to know. Now, moving on from foliage, we have the plant durability. The plant should perform dependably over 3 consecutive bloom seasons. And good drainage is an absolute requirement for tall bearded culture. They do not like to sit in water. They will rot. And we had some experience with that back east during our international competition with the 2019 year, the year after we planted. They got an abnormal amount of rain for New Jersey, and we did lose some of the plants. But we had a lot that survived. So just remember, they like water, but not too much water. To give you an idea of growth habits, I've got a picture here of a first-year plant. We've got a blooming stalk, and we've got a couple of increases on either side of the rhizome. Maybe there's a third one back there somewhere. The second year, we've got more stalks, a few more stalks, more increases. And then the third year, this is what a healthy third-year tall bearded iris plant should look like, with multiple stalks. I'm looking at the pink flowers here, are all part of this clump. Okay, as I showed a little bit in the previous picture, each rhizome should produce between 3 and 5 increases per year. And you can see from each of these pictures, this was the mother rhizome originally. Whoop, stop that. It wants to jump ahead. This was the original mother rhizome, and it put out 3 very healthy babies. And those babies are also now putting out increases. And then over here, again, you can see the original mother plant, and you can see 1, 2, I think that's 3, 4, 5 increases. So this one is also multiplying well. Floriferousness. In addition to foliage and durability, the plant must be floriferous. It must produce flowers, and it must remain in bloom over 2 weeks. Now, these pictures are lovely, except for one problem. Too many flowers are open at the same time. For now, the left one, for showing on the show bench, people would fall over with their tongues hanging out for 4 open flowers on a stalk. But for the garden, that stalk is not going to last as long as it should. In the second and third pictures, both of these plants are bunchy. The flowers are not properly separated from each other to show off their best qualities, and too many are blooming at the same time. With the floriferousness of the plant, the ratio of stalks to the number of fans must be at least 25%, but not more than 75%. On the picture here I have on the left, these were very interesting to try to take when you're trying to get the stalk in the picture along with all the increases. So I hopefully this will come across. We have a stalk here, a bloom stalk here. And with that bloom stalk, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fans. And we also have another bloom stalk over here. So we've got 2 bloom stalks over 5 fans. Now that's between 25% and 75%. So that's okay. This one on the right, we've got 1, 2, 3 stalks, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 fans that I can see. The other leaves are with the bloom stalks. So this one may be with 3 bloom stalks in it, may be over blooming for its growth. This also shows what happens if you get too many bloom stalks and not enough plant. There's a bloom out potential. This is when a rhizome puts up a bloom stalk, but does not have the energy to make increases. You can see this plant here, lovely bloom stalk, but there are no babies anywhere. And this one here, you can tell them, this one has just one increase here with the bloom stalk. So you want to be sure the plant is going to thrive. And I've heard from people that if you have a plant like this and it starts showing a bloom stalk with minimal or no increases, take a chance and cut the bloom stalk off before it blooms, to hopefully reallocate the energy back into the plant so that it will make new plants. I know you're missing out on seeing the bloom, but it's a chance you can save the plant. Otherwise, they're likely to just, when they bloom, they die, because each rhizome only puts up 1 bloom stalk. This, unfortunately, is a picture of when plants go bad. You can see this plant has short leaves, very spindly leaves. There's no stalk because it's totally overwhelmed by the 2 flowers that are opening at the same time. So this one needs some work. Moving on to the stalk. The stalk must have a good proportion and balance among the branching and where the flowers are placed. Tall and thicker stalks with wide branching are required to display large flowers. Smaller blossoms are best when displayed on smaller stalks. And one important thing is that tall bearded stalks should be at least 27.5 inches in height. If they are less, they are out of class, considered out of class because they're too short. But anything over 27.5 inches, and I've seen some that are like 48 inches tall, which you don't run into too often, but they do happen. But they have to be at least 27.5 inches in height. And I don't know how that came to be or how that was decided, but that's what we have in the Judges Handbook. Now, the stalks must hold the flowers well above the foliage. As you can see in the left-hand picture, that's not happening. We have the flowers down here among the leaves, but in the right-hand picture, the flowers are going to flower well above the top of the foliage. So this is a much better plant. The strength of the stalk, the stalk must be able to support the flower without it flopping over onto the ground. And this is with normal weather conditions. Staking is obviously proof of a weak stalk. Now, in these 2 cases, you can see that the gardener has had to stalk the plants to keep them up. In the next picture, strength is one thing, but do not expect an iris stalk to survive flood, hail, or high winds. The picture on the left shows hail damage, and it's pitiful. I mean, I don't really like showing bad pictures, but it gives you an idea of the damage that, hail can do. On the right-hand side, you can see this poor plant. All 3 stalks just couldn't make it through the wind or the rain or the whatever. Another sign of a weak plant is if you see stalks on the ground when plants around it are not on the ground. Normal weather conditions, the stalk should hold up the flowers without any staking. This is a couple of drawings right out of our Judges Handbook of the types of branching. Normal, I guess this is modified candelabrum branching, is where you have two branches here and a spur. This is the spur, that little bud that just kind of comes out at the top. This gives you a well-balanced view of the flowers opening. Nothing's touching each other. Now, the high branching or bunched look is when you've got the stalk that's so much taller than the leaves, and the branching is clustered at the top of the stalk. This is not as good a branching. Sometimes you will have in really robust plants a secondary bloom stalk. It's still coming from the major, the rhizome, but it kind of comes off here to the side. And that really gives you extra bloom, extra buds to make your 14-week blooming requirement. On the right-hand side, the wide candelabrum you often see in first-year plants. Boy, they want to put on a show so bad they can't stand it. So they really get out there and branch. But this is not the ideal branching for normal iris clumps, because the flowers tend to hit each other from the next bloom stalk. And then the last one is short. Now, if you've got smaller flowers, this can be very proportional and the branching can be just fine, just so long as it's 27.5 inches tall. Okay, here are some examples of different branching. Now, the first here is showing kind of toed in. The branches are not holding themselves out away from the stalk. The buds are kind of all clustered right near the stalk. Then stop that. Then on the right-hand side, we have a curved stalk. It's just kind of, it decided to go this way, and then it decided to come back that way. This can actually be, in my personal opinion, attractive. But again, my personal opinion is something I should, kind of put off to the side. And the best thing we want is the straight stalk with the proper branching and bud count. The modified candelabrum branching is the best, the one I mentioned before. The flowers should be pleasingly arranged over the upper 2/3 of the stalk. And the branching should be able to display the flowers without the flowers touching. Again, here are some poor branching. We've got toed in again, where everything's kind of, you've got the stalk in a straight line and all the buds are right there. You want the flowers to open at different levels so that they show themselves off the best. Unfortunately, this one, you've got a lot of them that are about the same level of height, and they're just going to bang into each other. And the color is attractive, but it's hard to see the individual flowers. And then we have a top-heavy stalk where you've got things blooming all at the top, and again, you cannot see the individual flowers. Bud count and bloom sequence in the iris stalk is very important. You must have a minimum of 7 buds per stalk, and the sequence of bloom is as critical as the bud count. A variety that displays not more than 2 open flowers at once not only prevents crowding, but greatly extends the bloom season. The series of pictures here are just showing a stalk with multiple open flowers. The one on the left just has 2 open. The one in the middle has 3 open. Again, exhibitors love this, but garden judging, this isn't so attractive. And then we've got 4 open. So the best that you want to try to get to maximize your bloom over an amount of time is having no more than 2 open flowers at a time. And as you can see, crowded flowers cannot meet the 14-day bloom season. One of the reasons I wanted to show these pictures is particularly for the one in the middle. This flower here is the original terminal bud. Now this flower is still open and it's still in good condition, but it's double socketed. And the second bud in that socket is trying to open at the same time as the original one. And it makes for a bunchy look. Many iris stalks now, as hybridizers have advanced genetics, we're getting triple sockets in terminal buds. And you want them to bloom one at a time. Wait for the one to fade before the second one opens, so there isn't this smushing of flowers together. And all 3 of these have just the same bunchy look that you want to try to get away from. Now, we're moving on to the actual flower after we've done the foliage and the stalk. Well, I should say the plant and the stalk. This is just the basic parts of the flower. The top 3 petals are the standards. The midrib is this kind of part of the flower that holds the standards up. It's a little thicker than the petals themselves are, and you need that in order to hold up the standards to keep them from flopping. And all the midribs should be in the same contour. They should show the same contour. In other words, they shouldn't be different arcs. This is the style. Often the style is, if the flower's really ruffly, you almost don't even see it. But sometimes, some flowers, the style is really a very attractive part of the flower. They're like this one is multicolor and it's got some lace on it. So the style can be a very attractive part. This is where the pollen is, actually, where the hybridizers have their fun. And this is the beard here, which can have an appendage if it's a space ager, or just the single beard as this flower has. And then you have the falls. And again, the falls also have a midrib down the center, which again, the contour should be the same in each of the falls, so they all drape similarly.
Jill?
Yes.
I have a question.
A question?
Yeah, back just a slide or so back on bud counts.
Yeah.
I have a question from BJ Jackson that says, can you ask what happens in the case that a stalk of any tall bearded never attains 7 buds on a single stem? I once had 7, but most often high bud count is 5. And I should say that BJ is in Winnipeg, Canada.
Colder. You're much colder. Well, in terms of judging the best, to get the best plant, 7 buds is what is required, but I know what you're saying. I've been in many, many gardens over the years and seen plants that have been introduced and are lovely and, great in every way, but they don't have 7. They might have 6 or 5. In that case, if you're judging in the garden, you should take off points for that. But it's one of those things you have to have a standard, and the standard right now is 7. Does that help? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. The flower must, of course, have color, and it must have good color clarity. We want bright colors that shine, that show themselves off. On the right, we have a picture of one that's not quite so colorful, where this is known as a muddy color. It just doesn't do a whole lot. So you do want a vibrancy in the color. Now, there are various color patterns, and what I'm going to show you here is just kind of an abbreviated list. I do another program strictly on iris color patterns, and they have gotten very sophisticated over the last few years with a lot of different enhancements and embellishments that the hybridizers are getting through the genetics. But this is just a basic color pattern list. The first one is the self. The entire flower is the same color, including the beard. The bicolor, the standards and the falls are different colors. The bitone, the standards and the falls are two shades of the same color, in this case, violet. The amina color pattern, the standards are white and the falls are any color. The placata pattern, the flower has a basic ground color such as white or tan or beige, or we even have pink ground colors now. But the petals are dotted and stitched over the ground color in a different color. This is known as a purple-white placata. The variegata color pattern, the standards are gold or yellow, and the falls are in the red or brown tones. The luminata, this flower has a glow effect, and you can tell it immediately. The interesting specific of it is that the veining on the falls, instead of being the dark veining that you normally see, the veining on a luminata is always white. So you've got the reverse contrast on the falls from the flower color to the veining. Stop that. Broken color. The flower is streaked or splotched with a contrasting color from the ground color. So you have a ground color, and then you have streaks and splotches on top of that in a different color. And in this case, no two flowers are alike. Overall, the colors must create harmony and last at least 3 days. And the colors should fade in a pleasing manner. I put both of these pictures in to show what happens over the bloom time of the stalk. You can see in the left-hand picture, the terminal flower obviously opened first because it's fading. And you have darker color, more richer colors. You know, this is the original color. These flowers are just open. And this one, I think over here is just opening. So you can see, and that's fading relatively nicely. On the right-hand side, again, you have the terminal is fading and it's getting that kind of crepey look, like it's beginning to fold. This one has a new flower already trying to come out, but you can see the original color on the bottom two flowers. The middle flower is newer than the bottom flower, but it gives you part of judging is learning a way of looking at the plant and the flower and noticing once you get the overall impact of the plant, then noticing the inner details of the foliage, the stalk, and the flower. I learned a lot from just over time looking at different plants and different stalks in different gardens, and just stand there for a few seconds, minutes, and just look at all of the overall image of it.
Jill, we have
Yes.
Another person wants to ask a question. Joan Ernest, would you unmute and ask your question?
Hi, yes. I'm wondering how you measure the height of an iris. Do you go to the top of the standards or the bottom of the standard?
That's
I
a
mean,
good question.
measure the height of an iris.
No, you take it from the bottom of the stalk.
Okay.
Anyway, I take it from the bottom of the stalk to the top of the tallest flower
Okay, the top of that standard on the tall flower.
on the terminal bed. Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Uh-huh. Okay. Continuing on the flower form, as I mentioned, the strong midribs are essential for both standards and falls to keep them in their proper arc so that they hold themselves up or they drape nicely. And the contour of the standards and falls must be identical. The falls should be large enough in relation to the standards to produce a good balance when you're looking at the flower as a whole. And here are some acceptable forms of standards. You can have the standards slightly open, like the first picture here. This also shows off the style very nicely, and this is perfectly acceptable form of standards. The second is a more conical shape for the standards. Again, you can still see the style in there, and also everything should be symmetrical in order for your cone to look like a cone. You can't have the standard flopping out here to the side. And then one of the last forms is the domed look, where the standards touch at the top. This is, again, very good flower form, perfectly acceptable. Now we have some not so acceptable examples. The one on the left, you can see the standards are leaning over to one side. The contours are not in the same place on each of the standards. And they're probably, well, they look floppy. The second picture, you've got one standard that's holding itself up very nicely. And then you have one where the midrib didn't quite make it, and the standard is falling back on itself. This is not good. And in the third picture, I tried to find an example where, in this case, it looks like the standards, when you look at them as a whole, are bigger than the falls. And this makes the flower look out of proportion. You want the standards and the falls to be in a good proportion where they balance. None is too big or too small compared to the other one. Now the falls, again, these are all three very acceptable forms of falls. We have the narrow fall on the left picture, the broad fall, which encompasses the entire fall area with the falls overlapping. This is perfectly okay. And then we have the flaring falls, which don't drop. They're more perpendicular, and that's okay. They show off the flower in a different way. And I have seen smaller flowers shown off better if they had flaring falls, because it gets you to look into the flower. So these are perfectly acceptable flower forms. Then we have some poorer forms of falls. If they tuck underneath, now this is strictly for tall bearded. Arrowbred irises tuck in, and they're supposed to tuck in, and that's the way they are. But tall bearded iris flowers are not supposed to tuck under. And then you have the pinched falls, where it's like you've taken your fingers and just pinched the flower on the bottom part, which is not acceptable form for the falls. Substance and durability. Substance is the inner tissue structure that maintains the flower form and color. It's the inner workings that make the flower stand up, stand out, and look gorgeous. The substance aids in withstanding weather conditions and in retention of color. The iris flower that does not maintain its form and color saturation for at least 3 days should lose the entire 10 points. The flower substance also has, it's enhanced by the texture. And we have various kinds of texture that you will notice on flowers. Some have a velvety texture on the falls. Some will have a satin sheen. You can see in this one, you can see the shining of the sun onto the falls. And then if you look real close, I tried to show this as best I could, but when you get close up on this fall of this particular flower, it's like diamond dusted or sparkly. And I'm sure you've seen other flowers that when they get out into the sun, they twinkle just a little. This is a nice enhancement to the flower, which just aids in its beauty and aids in its attractiveness. And lastly, the iris flower should be distinctive. It should be a variety that is recognized in any garden if the label were removed. This is really, it's subjective and it's kind of vague, but you know it when you see it. These are all flowers. I think you would know what they are even without my putting a tag on them. This left one is thornbird. The middle one is queen circle. And the right one is expose. You want a flower that has a personality, says something to you. It says, look at me. Okay. Now here are some slides of seedlings that I saw in my travels over the last couple of weeks, just to give you an idea of what's coming up. I've only got an hour, so I had to cut the pictures down. But left, we have a nice ruffly pink. In the middle, we have what looks like Illuminata with gold-edged standards. Banding has become a very popular thing in the newer irises. I'm seeing flowers now with double or triple bands on the falls, along with the standards having their own band or edge. On the right, we have like a color blot on the falls. It's not a spot. It's not a single, like a single white spot or something. It covers the half of the falls all the way around to the halves with a color blending on the spot. So this is very different. And you've also got flowers now with color blending up the midribs. And we've got lace and thumbprints and all kinds of other enhancements that really add a uniqueness to the iris flower. In summary, first consider the entire plant as you approach it. Fragrance is subjective, and right now the American Iris Society is not adding fragrance into our point scoring system. They do in France, they do in other countries. Again, strictly up to the people who are creating the scoring systems. Smell one every so often. Again, it's fragrance is in the, I should say, the nose of the beholder. I know, bad joke, terrible. Casting a vote for an iris is your endorsement of introduction and higher awards. So be very, very careful with them. Grow as many different classes and varieties of iris as you can, and go to as many gardens as you can. It's the more you get out and look at what's out there, the more you pick up different things, different traits that different hybridizers use, or different ways that color is used in the flower. There's just, you don't really realize you're picking it up until later when you're trying to decide and discern between which plants to vote for. And it should be fun. You should enjoy it. So I had a very fun spring bloom season, and now I'm gonna rest for a while. So does anyone have any other questions before we go to the test?
I have one question from the chat, Jill.
Okay.
Would you explain substance again? I do not understand how it works with color.
Okay. Let me go back to. Okay. Substance is the inner tissue of the petals. It's what makes up the petals, and it's all part of the, I guess, the genetics that form the shape, the color, the you have to have it in order to have a good flower. If you have bad substance, you have a mushy, floppy looking flower that doesn't have much color. It's the inner workings of the iris flower body. Does that help?
Okay, thank you, Jill. I don't see any other questions at the moment.
Okay. Do you want me to go through each of the questions?
Yes, I think so. And
Okay.
there may be some other questions after that.
Okay. Okay. The first question, tall bearded iris bloom stalks must maintain at least the following height. Number 2, true or false? Good drainage is an absolute requirement for tall bearded irises. Number 3, how many increases should a tall bearded rhizome make per year? True or false? Skimpy or floppy foliage will require that the variety be penalized the full 10 points. Number 5, 5A. The ratio of stalks to the number of fans at a minimum must be at what percentage? And then 5B, the flowers will become crowded and few plants will remain, resulting in bloom out, should the ratio exceed what percentage? Number 6, poor branching is evidenced in many ways, such as A, true or false, branches that toe in. B, true or false, excessively short branches may display flowers at approximately the same level, creating an unpleasant effect. C, true or false, branches spaced over the upper 1/4 of the stalk, resulting in unbalanced top branching, severely reduces the probability that the stalk will remain erect. Number 7, the number of open flowers at once in any variety is important because the flowers should not be crowding each other in the clump, but also they should extend the bloom season. What is the magic number of open flowers? A variety that displays not more than blank. Number 8, true or false? In aminas, bicolors, bitones, and variegata types, color types, Either sharp or a subtle contrast is acceptable, but it is important that the colors create harmony. 9, true or false? Strong midribs are vital assets to form and are an absolute necessity in the standards, but not in the falls. 10, what is the substance in the flower structure that determines how long the flower can maintain its color and symmetry of form? Okay.
Okay, we have a few questions, a couple of them that pertain to questions on the test.
Okay.
So do you want to address those before we go to the answers?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So the first one is about substance again. Has anyone counted the number of cells that make up the substance of a flower?
Has anyone counted the number of cells?
Yeah.
I have no idea.
And then the same person wants to have a little bit more information on question 4, about question 4,
Okay.
which was skimpy or floppy foliage will require the variety be penalized the full 10 points.
Okay. That one I may not have covered as completely during the program. But it's right out of the judge's handbook. Skimpy or floppy foliage is probably the worst thing that foliage can have, without giving you the answer.
Okay. And then the other one let me ask you this question that someone asked here. Some varieties excel and have received national awards. On the other hand, what is the average bud count for these same varieties in areas with long seasons of high heat or very cold climates?
Well, I don't know if anyone has actually done a study of that. That would be an interesting study, a research project for somebody to do, to go to different climates with the same varieties and check that out. I don't know that that's ever been done.
Yeah, it would be interesting. I do know
the foundation provides money for research projects, just
right.
for anybody who might be interested.
Yes. I do know that in extreme conditions, I think you will get less bud count than in ideal conditions, certainly.
Yes.
So,
I'm sorry, Gary. I just wanted to say that for spurious, that is the case. And for example, on the West Coast, where we could have 9, 10 buds for spurious, on the East Coast, it's like half of that most times. And sometimes, that's all you can get. So just wanted to say that.
A couple other things. Andy, if you check the chat, Andy put a link to the test for those of you who are looking for that link to the test. It's also in the original news and notes announcement of this webinar. There is a link to it there. And you can do it either by printing off the test and sending it either electronically or by mail, or you can send it electronically right here by filling out the exam when you go to this link and then submitting it. There is one other, a couple comments and questions from Holly Johnson. She says, you had mentioned that an iris with the same color standards and falls was a self if it had a beard the same color. What if the beard is a different color? But the falls and standards are the same color, but the beard is a different color.
I think technically that's still considered a self, but this is one area where the AIS board has been redoing the judge's handbook, and we haven't gotten to the glossary yet. And the definition of self is in the glossary. And hopefully we will amend it to include that the beard doesn't have to be the same color, because Often that is the case.
Okay. And then another question, is it okay for few of the faults to be present in first year growth?
Okay, ask me that one again.
Is it okay for a few of the faults to be present in first year growth?
Oh, of course. And that's part of the garden judging process is you have to look at the same plant blooming over, 2 to 3 bloom seasons. And as the plant matures, you want to see if those faults disappear or if they remain.
Okay. And then looks like someone wants a little more information on 5B, and then I think there's a comment.
5B, you mean?
Yeah, the flowers will become crowded and few plants will remain, resulting in bloom out.
Yeah.
Should the ratio exceed what percentage? And I'm not sure you actually gave that percentage, although it was in the previous one about what the ideal range was, 25 to 75%. So,
well, to give you the answer, the ratio, if it exceeds 75%, you're likely to have bloom out.
yeah, and in the chat, Don and Jenny Spoon actually gave that, so that matches yours. That's good.
Yeah.
And then Howie is asking, says, I found that some of my irises have more buds away from my desert environment.
Okay, so you have some growing in the desert, Howie, and then some growing like in a home garden that's not as deserty. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Howie, if you want to unmute.
It's just a comment, Jill, that when he sends them out to people outside his area,
okay, I get you now.
Do better than in the desert where he is.
An example is one of the ones that I introduced that has 7 buds in my climate, had 9 or 10 in Des Moines. So
there you go. Okay.
And,
that seems to be supporting the theory that the drier climates don't produce as many buds. But if you're getting 7 anyway, then you've got really multiple budded plants. That's great.
And then the last question I have here is, has anyone ever tried upping the nitrogen in the feeding for plants in danger of bloom out? So essentially, is giving them more nitrogen, does that help in preventing bloom out?
That I have not heard of. That's the first time I've heard that suggestion. So I don't know. I'm sorry.
Another interesting research project.
Yes, another interesting research project.
Okay, I think that's all the questions I have. So if you want to go to the answers.
Go through the answers, okay. Answer to number 1 is 27.5 inches. Do you want me to read the questions again?
Yeah, probably just
okay.
To.
Tall bearded iris bloom stalks must maintain at least the following heights: 27.5 inches. True or false? Good drainage is an absolute requirement for tall bearded irises. True. How many increases should a tall bearded rhizome make per year? 3 to 5. True or false? Skimpy or floppy foliage will require that the variety be penalized the full 10 points. That's true. 5A, the ratio of stalks to the number of fans at a minimum must be at what percentage? 25%. 5B, the flowers will become crowded and few plants will remain, resulting in bloom out. Should the ratio exceed what percentage? 75%. Poor branching is evidenced in many ways, such as A, true or false, branches that toe in, true. B, true or false. Excessively short branches may display flowers at approximately the same level, creating an unpleasant effect, true. C, true or false. Branches spaced over the upper 1/4 of the stalk, resulting in unbalanced top branching, severely reduces the probability that the stalk will remain erect. That's false. It's the upper 1/3 of the stalk, not 1/4. The number of open flowers at once in any variety is important because the flowers should not be crowding each other in the clump, but also they should extend the bloom season. What is that magic number of open flowers? A variety that displays not more than 2. True or false? In aminas, bicolors, bitones, and variegata types, either sharp or subtle contrast is acceptable, but it is important that the colors create harmony. And that's true. True or false? Strong midribs are vital assets to form and are an absolute necessity in the standards, but not in the false, and that's false. 10. What is the substance in the flower structure that determines how long the flower can maintain its color and symmetry of form? And that's the inner tissue of the flower petals. And that's it. Okay. So, Gary, you're muted.
So thank you so much, Jill. That was a wonderful presentation. Thank you for the JT. I think there's one more question, Gary, if you want to.
Yeah, there's a comment about 6B, it says the handbook says long branches cause this.
And which?
That was 6B, so.
I'm looking. The person who said that is correct. I'm wrong. It should be excessively long branches. You caught a mistake. Thank you.
Okay. And then there's a Bonita says, not sure I understand excessively short branching. Wouldn't excessively short branching result in flowers along a tight vertical plant? And it's sort of the same thing you just were talking about.
Yeah. No, I goofed.
And comment, as a rookie, this was fabulous. Thank you. And Dell says on 6C, the upper 1/4 is within the upper 1/3, so it is a true statement. Now, that's debatable, I think.
It was probably a tricky question. In the sense, you're right. In that sense, it's just the handbook is talking about the top third, not the top fourth. So, and it's the point is that you don't want the flowers all opening at the top because the stalk tends to fall over.
Yeah. And and there's comments about that long branches reach up and have everything blooming the same height.
Yeah.
Vertical plane, not plant, resulting in bunching. And a question about, do we get garden judging credit? This is classroom.
This is classroom. Yeah.
Yes. And how do we access the test to do online? Andy just put on the link again. So if you can click on that link, you can get to the test online, I think. And comment about your photos are very clear. Thank you. Excellent program. And so then a question, so did you change the answer to 6B?
Yes, I will change the answer to 6B.
Okay, I think that's all I have. Great program, Jill.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jill. We really appreciate it. And I think Howie is still here. Howie is going to Merci, Florence. Howie is going to give a program next week on the next year's convention, which is in New Mexico. And Howie, if you want to give us a short description of what you're going to do.
So this one's going to be a little bit different. We have 6 gardens in New Mexico. So we'll have videos, which are interviews with the garden hosts of all 6 gardens. And the interviews will be interspersed with photographs and videos of walking through the gardens while they were in bloom. And it'll be everything from when we first planted them to the way they were this year, which is the way we were supposed to see them before COVID.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So it will be a formal invitation to all of you to join us next year in New Mexico. So regardless, there will be no test for that. And,
No test. Okay.
And we hope you enjoy it. Come and join us next week. And the invitation to register for that will go out on Friday, as usual, through Newts and Notes. So, and that's all we have for tonight. This program will be available on YouTube in a few days. So if you like to wait for that, if you didn't see it, some people joined us late. So if you didn't see the whole program, you can see it on YouTube and also take the test at that time. And if you take it online, you don't need to do anything. It'll go to your JT chair for your region after that, and you'll get credit. And the program will be available there for probably at least 6 months, so through the end of the year.
There's one comment, maybe a question and possibly a suggestion. Would Jill do her program on color patterns? So
Oh, I have to